Today we're going to be talking about perm skills, pre-perm analysis, and perm procedures. A lot of this on this video is review, but there's going to be some new things. So the first thing you do need to analyze before you give someone a perm, you need to make sure you need to know what their hair type is. You need to make sure that you pick the right size rod. I always told my clients that when I picked things, it was based on my years of experience and the knowledge that I had, but ultimately it was a guess. And if anything, if I did something that they didn't like, I would err on the side of the curl being too loose. So worst case scenario, they might have to come back in and I might have to re-perm them after a few weeks and perm it tighter at my own cost. I never went the other way where I made it too tight or I used too strong of a perm solution. I would rather fix it the other way. So I would tell them that when they were a brand new customer. Obviously, after they were my customer for a time or two, I knew their hair, I knew how it reacted, and I knew the size perm rods and the correct perm to use on them. All right, so this is review porosity, the ability of the hair to absorb moisture, liquids, or chemicals. Again, it comes back to that cuticle layer that looks like shingles on a roof or looks like scales on a fish. If it's slightly open, that's good. That's normal porosity. If it's really, really open, that's bad. It's highly, excessively porous hair. And if it's very, very tight, then it's resistant. And you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get the perm to take. Remember again, if the hair is resistant, it will be very shiny because it has a flat surface that light is reflecting off of. Okay, and if you have excessively porous hair, you may want to consider not giving them a perm. I would have people that would insist that they wanted a perm, and I'm looking at their hair thinking, there's no way I'm giving you a perm. This is horrible. And they would just insist and insist. So what I would do is I would perm one piece underneath in the back. And I would go ahead and protect the hair around that with cholesterol or conditioner, wrap multiple layers of cotton around it. I didn't want the perm solution to get on any other hair. And I would perm one or two rods and let them see the finished product. When hair is really porous, it is probably lacking elasticity as well. And the hair will look dry and fried, and it doesn't really have a curl. It just kind of has a wave that hangs there. It looks horrible. So that was usually the way that I was able to convince them that they did not want to get a perm after all. Okay, the porosity test, also known as a finger test. This is when you run your fingers backwards toward the scalp. Okay, so if it feels bumpy, you have more porous hair. If it feels smooth, you have more resistant hair. And elasticity. Okay, remember dry hair can stretch 20% of its length. Wet hair can stretch 40 to 50% of its length. And it's the ability to stretch and return without breaking. You can stretch anybody's hair, but if it breaks, that has bad elasticity. That is not recommended that they get any chemical services. Okay, the elasticity test is also known as the pull test. And just a reminder how you do that, you run your fingernail down the hair just like you're making a ribbon at Christmas with the ribbon and a pair of scissors. And you do that a couple times, you get that to curl up, and then you pull it straight, says taut, for 10 seconds and release. If it curls back up, you're good to go. If it looks like this, maybe not, okay? It may need conditioning. Now, that brings up another interesting point. You cannot condition someone's hair right before a perm. It will not take. So if they need conditioning treatments, you're going to do them, and then they're going to have to wait a period of time before they come back in for the perm. The exception to this was Matrix had Instacure, it was called. They may still have it. Most wonderful thing in the world. It was an leave-in conditioner. You could spray it on the hair. You could literally wrap the hair with Instacure. Rather than spraying water on the hair to wrap it, you could spray Instacure. It did not keep the perm from working at all, but it filled in. It was a filler. It equalized the porosity of the hair, and it turned out very well. So that was a wonderful product. All right, texture. Is the hair fine, medium, or coarse? Okay, so fine hair and coarse hair can be resistant. Fine hair because the cuticle is more tightly packed. Coarse because there's many more layers of cuticle. Medium is your average. That's the easiest one to do. It has about 7 to 10 layers of cuticle around the outside. Now, density and texture do not go hand in hand. You can have big, thick hairs that are coarse, but have very few of them. As if you're a woman, for instance, and you're starting to go bald, you can have very fine hair and have tons and tons of density, so a lot of fine hair. Okay, so it's the amount of hair per square inch, and it's referred to as light, medium, or heavy, or thin, medium, or thick. So that's where people get confused. Oh, do you have thick hair? Okay, are you talking about the texture, meaning it's coarse, or are you talking about the density that you have lots and lots of hairs on your head? Two different things. Okay, manufacturers label their perms according to those three things. It'll say, you know, for coarse hair, fine hair. It'll talk about the porosity, and it'll talk about the desired curl. I feel like these two are the main thing. We saw that on the box yesterday, where not so much the texture. Okay, do you want a firm curl? Do you want a soft body wave? All right. You have your physical phase where you part and wrap. You have your chemical phase where you put on your perm solution and your neutralizer. Which one is most important? They are equally important. If you just squirt perm solution on and you haven't wrapped it, you're not going to get anything. If you wrap it and never put the perm solution on, you're not going to get anything. You have to have both phases. Okay, so when you distribute the hair, when you first comb it to give someone a perm, you can distribute it away from the face. You can distribute it towards the face. And if you remember, the hair naturally grows forward from the apex towards the face. You know this because little kids, their hair wants to fall in their face constantly. If they don't let breadths in their hair, that's when moms get frustrated and they get bangs cut, okay? Because the hair's falling forward. From a side part, I talked about this, okay? I could wrap a regular 9-section wrap and leave the last little bit, and instead of wrapping them this way, I would turn them this way and do a side part. In this one, you're wrapping one row one way, the next row the other way, this direction, that direction. Okay, so you get these waves. Again, please don't do this to anybody. Okay, prior to wrapping a perm, you're gonna section, and the main types of sections are rectangular, that's your 9-section, circular, that's your contour wrap, or oblong, like that ugly one we just looked at. Okay, again, all right, rectangular, circular, you're following the shape of the head. All of your sections are going to generally be pie-shaped to get it to move around. It's going to be larger to skinnier, and you're going to actually part the hair like that. And oblong. This row goes this way, this row goes that way, and it creates waves. All right, wrapping. Okay, so there's two ways to look at this, and I'm going to explain what I think is the best way to wrap a perm, and then some exceptions when you should wrap it otherwise. Okay, so you've got the size of the base, how much hair do you part, and where's the rod in relationship to the base. Okay, so again, this is review. You've got your overlap crokinole method and you've got your spiral method. All right, your overlap method. You are going to get more volume with an overlap method. It produces curls and undulating waves, okay, base lift, and it's for short to medium length hair. Back when spiral perms were popular, everybody wanted a spiral perm, whether their hair was 3 inches long or not. So I had to establish some sort of rule to let people know, you know yourself, those of you that have started your spiral curls, what happens if the hair isn't long enough when you try to wrap it around that curling iron? You don't get a nice defined curl because the hair's too short to make enough revolutions around the rod to have it turn out correctly. The same thing happens with a perm. So if the hair's too short, it's going to turn out just horribly. So I would tell them I would stick a comb against their head, and you know how long a comb is. It's like 7 inches long. The rule was their hair had to be longer than that comb or I would not give them a spiral perm. And that was how I got away from a lot of spiral perms when people wanted them. It was ridiculous. They thought it was some magical thing. Well, it's created because the hair's too long to keep overlapping and the perm solution is not going to be able to get to the ends. So we created a method where it was sitting beside each revolution was sitting beside itself so that all the perm solution was getting to the hair. Okay, and there's the spiral technique. It does not overlap. It sits beside it. All right, you've got your straight rods and you've got concave. We only have concave here, and I'll explain why. In a traditional perm, okay, now I'm not talking about, you know, if you're going to give maybe a digital perm these days, I believe the rods are straight, and that's fine. It's giving you a different look. But if you did a perm on a little old lady and you used a straight rod and the ends looked like this, they would have a heart attack. They would think that their perm didn't really take. They wanted the ends to be very defined. So if you think about it, because it's concave, the first hair that wraps around that is actually tighter. And then as the hair builds up, the curl gets a little bit looser towards the scalp. They wanted those tight ends, okay? They did not like when it was the same way on the ends. They were very upset. So traditional perms, concave is better. With someone that wants a more modern look, I'm sure straight rods are fantastic for that. Okay, if you use large diameter tools, you're going to get large diameter curls. I mean, you can perm on anything. You could literally take a soda can, wrap someone's hair around it, and perm them. Although metal's not good, but you know what I'm talking about. If you had a can, something that big that was made out of plastic. Now, would you get much? No, it would look like crap. But you can perm around anything. I have seen perms where they wrapped it around chopsticks. I mean, anything your mind can come up with, you can perm. But large rods are going to be large curls. Medium are going to be curlier, and small is going to be very curly. So whatever the diameter is, you know, if you're wrapping around a chopstick, that's mighty small. You're going to have very curly hair. All right, these rods are very nice. You take and you roll the hair up and then you just bend the end over. Very nice, especially for like a more modern perm. Why we didn't use them very much in the past was because, again, they were all one length. They did not get skinnier in the middle, so a traditional perm client would not like that. Very, very nice though, very easy to use. All right, and again, the tighter the perm rod, so they're showing you there a red perm rod. I've used them. That's really how big they are. They're horrid. That is going to shrink that hair up like crazy. And then the bigger you go, it's not going to shrink the hair up as much. You're not going to get that same length reduction. All right. And the amount of times that the hair goes around, again, think back to my story. If you try to use short hair and go around a big rod, you're not going to get the same effect. We did have a type of perm that we did that was very effective and very, very nice back in probably the 90s, where we would wrap the hair on small rods, so maybe like pink or gray, and we would perm it, and we would rinse the perm solution out, and then we would take all the rods out. Now you have to be very careful with the hair at this point because the cuticle's wide open. So that's where Instacure by Matrix came in really handy again, because it would make the hair very easy to comb. We would then take and wrap the hair not on a perm rod, but on a curler, a regular curler with a big diameter, and then we would neutralize it on that. Now this is weird, but it works better than simply perming it on the big curler. The small rod breaks down the bonds better, and then when you wrap it on that big curler and neutralize it, it ends up being a bigger curl. Now, of course, you had to use plastic clippies to hold that roller in because metal and our chemicals do not go together very well. So I had to make sure I had plastic clippies. I would do it like that, and it was really, really, really nice. All right, so now we're going to talk about tool position and base control. All right, so volume is a result of lift, and lift is a result of base control. So base control refers to two things. I already talked about that. The size of the base, how much hair you parted in relationship to the diameter of the rod, and where the rod is sitting. Okay, so I'm going to tell you my thoughts on both of these. Okay, base size. You never can make the section longer than the perm rod. Okay, it causes drag. You're dragging the hair in, and it will give you an uneven curl. They claim that you can make the bases bigger. I don't like this at all, okay? They're saying you don't have to just make it the same size as the perm rod. You can make it 1.5 times bigger. Well, then you have big gaps between your perm rods. There's a lot more hair on the perm rod. I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan at all. You take the perm rods out and you've got big holes in between there because the curls all squished together, and then you've got gaps. I wouldn't do it. All right, tool position. Okay, so it is determined by, again, the size of the base, but we're going to assume that all of our bases are just the size of the perm rod. But then the angle. Now here, this is interesting. Okay, so anytime you want something on base, if you can look very closely here, this perm rod is sitting on the hair that's been parted for it. And that is achieved by over-directing the hair forward. I'm not a fan of this with perming. I am a fan of this if I'm wrapping curlers. Okay, I think it's just, I don't know, it's just a little too much tension on the hair to put it on base. But maybe if someone had problems with their crown going flat, maybe I would consider that in a certain section. It's not horrible, just not something that I would normally do. Okay, so they're over-directing it 45 degrees beyond perpendicular. Perpendicular to this head would be like this. 90 degrees would be like this, so it's 45 degrees beyond perpendicular. That will give you on base. Half on base is perpendicular. Now, I'm sure when you look at this, you think, well, that's still going forward. Well, no, it isn't, because the head is shaped differently here than on the previous picture. They should have shown it all in the same place. This is perpendicular. So anytime you pull the hair straight out from the head and wrap it, it will be half on the base and half off. Okay? That's my favorite way to wrap a perm. It eliminates a lot of those marks that you get right at the scalp when you have a fresh perm. Okay, you don't see the separation at the scalp. And it is the most commonly used base, is the half off. That's what you'll generally see people using. All right, under directed, and then we have off base. Okay, so there's two separate things here. Under directed positions the rod in the lower half of the base. So in this instance, they're showing, look how big that base is. That's a big base. So the perm rod's still on the base. It hasn't dropped down below it, but it is sitting on the lower half of it. Okay? Again, not a fan of taking too much hair. Now the difference between that and off base is you only have as much hair parted as the size of the perm rod, but you held your hands down 45 degrees below perpendicular, and you wrapped it up. Now, this one I would definitely consider using in many cases. This will give you a more natural look, like maybe the perm is a couple weeks old, because you don't get those marks on the head. So this one for a younger person would look much more natural than taking it perpendicular to the head and doing half on and half off base. So now just remember, on base, 45 degrees beyond perpendicular, half is perpendicular, under directed, bigger base, and wrapping it, holding your hands perpendicular, but it ends up wrapping down to the bottom half. And off base is 45 degrees below perpendicular. Takes it off base. Okay, end paper techniques. So we did the bookend technique where we folded it in half. We have the double paper technique, also called the double flat. I use this one pretty frequently anytime that there's a variation in lengths, like the hair's going from a little bit shorter to a little bit longer. I'll use this because it encompasses more of the ends and holds it together for me. The single paper technique, this one is you just put one paper on top of the strand and roll it up. This one is crazy. It works because the hair sticks to the end paper because the end paper's wet, and then you can just wrap it up. I can't see me ever using it, but I worked with a lady that used this, and holy crap, could she wrap a perm fast, because she didn't have to stop and bend them in half. She just put it on top and wrapped. She was fantastic at it. The cushion technique, you'll hear Mrs. Schaefer talk about this. This incorporates several end papers. So you could start with a bookend, and as soon as you wrap and get to the end of that, you lay another one on top, and you wrap and you lay another one on top. And you can do that the whole way up to the scalp. Okay, so if you have a shorter piece that pops up when you're wrapping, you're going to do that. It also provides a layer of paper between the hair if the hair is more fragile. It will be easier on the hair than having hair against hair. All right, securing your perm rods. Okay, they're showing you their version of a pick. In the last video, I showed you the picks that we use. You can do that while you're wrapping. You can do that after you're done wrapping, but it stabilizes the perm rods and keeps that rubber band from cutting into the hair. If it cuts in, it's breaking there, and it's ugly. Okay, and I already talked about getting conditioned. You cannot get your hair deep conditioned or protein conditioned or anything like that right before a perm. You're going to have to leave at least a week before you can get a perm, or the perm is not going to take. All right, applying the perm solution. Again, the chemical phase is applying the perm solution in the neutralizer. It begins after all the wrapping is done. Always follow manufacturer's directions. Always, 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 always. Even if you know you've given that perm 150 times, you're going to take a second and look at those directions and make sure that you didn't confuse it with another perm, that you forgot, that you got confused. You do not want to have to rewrap a perm simply because you didn't look at the directions. You don't want to have to go through that again. Take a second, look at the directions. I can't stress that enough. All right, it says here, once the hair is wrapped, you're going to put barrier cream like cholesterol around the hairline and then cotton. Replace the cotton once it becomes saturated. I told you about that in the last video. You do not want that wet cotton sitting on the skin. It will become irritated and could burn their skin. Timing and testing, follow the manufacturer's directions. When you're ready to take a test curl, you unwind it 1.5 turns, not this much. You don't take it out. Man, when I was doing skateboard testing, oh my goodness, the stuff I saw. It's 1.5 turns, stop, let that hair relax, and you want that to be the same size as the perm rod, okay? If the perm is not self-timing, you're going to have to take test curls periodically. Look at it. You're going to take it from about 3 different places on the head, the side, the back, the top. I'm not too, it could go a little longer. Set the timer another 5 minutes, test it again. Think about, is it too cold in the room that it's not processing fast enough? Do I need to lay a towel on top of the plastic bag to start trapping more body heat? Do I need to preheat a hood dryer, turn it off and put them under there so there's more warmth around their head? What do I need to do? Okay, again, 1.5 to 2 turns. You should see an S shape or pattern. This is a terrible look at this. On a bigger perm rod, it's very hard to see that S. They should have used a little tiny rod and you can see it much more clearly. That's a very poor look at a test curl. When you say yes, it's the same size curl as the perm rod, you're good to go. You're ready to rinse. You've got to remove that perm solution before you can move on. Blotting. This may be at the end once you start rinsing stuff. This is probably more important than rinsing properly. If you leave this hair saturated with water and you squirt neutralizer on it, that neutralizer has nowhere to go. The hair's already full of water. It's just going to run off. And you're going to have a very, very weak perm because the neutralizer didn't get in there to do its job. On the opposite end, you can't have the hair dry. If you have the hair dry, the perm solution's going to run off. Okay? You have to have it damp like a sponge. So I use a towel, then I use Bounty, and I want to get to the point where if I touch the head, my hand will be damp, but there will be no drips of water anywhere. You do not want that. You just want it damp. Okay, then you apply the neutralizer the same way that you did the waving lotion. You basically want to make sure that you don't use too much neutralizer. Again, originally you want to use a T-pin, not scissors. And you want to be able to get over that head twice at a minimum. Again, if you feel like you've saturated all the rods, going over them twice, there's no point in emptying that bottle on that person's head, whether it's perm solution or neutralizer. It's just going to run all over them. All right. Now, there's 2 different methods. Here's where once you learn something good enough, you can break the rules. So I generally will take the perm rods out. I will scrub that person's head like I'm shampooing them. And it feels really, really good at that point because they've had all these neutralizer and the perm solution, everything trickling down over their head. It kind of makes it itchy if you can think about it that way. And they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so awesome. And then I rinse it. The only time I would, and sometimes that's breaking the rules, because sometimes it'll say, leave the perm rods in and then rinse it. But I generally always take them out, scrub them, rinse it. The only time I would not do that would be if I knew I had a client that it was difficult to get a good perm, a good curl on her head. I would probably go ahead and rinse it with the perm rods in, but that would be like 1 out of 100 clients. All right, what do we know? Porosity refers to the ability of the hair to absorb moisture, liquids, or chemicals. True or false? Normal dry hair is capable of being stretched about 25% of its length. True or false? The degree of coarseness or fineness in the hair fiber or hair shaft is referred to as. Medium hair has on average 7 to 10 layers of. To perform consistent and reliable perm services, you can rely on the 5-step procedure for predictable results, which consists of distribute, section, wrap, process, and. The first step in creating the perm is for you to direct or distribute the hair in the direction it will be by the client. Prior to wrapping a perm, the head is often divided into several large sections for. In perm, volume is the result of base lift, and base lift is the result of. The most commonly used base control is. End papers are used to control the hair ends and keep the hair smoothly wrapped around the perm rod, ensuring a smooth, uniform. All right. Number 1, true. The ability to absorb moisture. 2, false. Dry hair can be stretched 20%, 1/5, not 1/4. 3, texture is the degree of coarseness or fineness. 4, medium hair has 7 to 10 layers of cuticle. 5, to perform consistent and reliable perm services, okay, it's distribute, section, wrap, process, and neutralize. You cannot go without that step. Number 6, you're going to distribute the hair or comb it in the direction it will be worn by the client. Okay, you divide the head into large sections for control. That's why we part for 9 sections. We're controlling the hair so that we can properly section it, wrap it, and process it. Okay, in perm, volume is the result of base control. That's where we talked about how big the base is and the angle we wrap the hair. The most commonly used base control is half off. That's perpendicular to the head, straight out. And end papers ensure a smooth, uniform curl formation. Yeah, if you don't use an end paper, you might as well forget it. All right, thank you very much.